Now today, I'm going to be covering some of the changes that you need to know about now that Refined Storage 2 is officially out. Let's not forget this video is brought to you in dark mode. Now to see a full list and a major update and article about all of this that Rael put together, of course you can find that linked down in the description below. I will have that all listed there. But for my visual enjoyers out there, this video will be for you. Now of course don't forget to click that subscribe button if you enjoy videos like these, and also, well, give it a huge thumbs up to help that YouTube algorithm. Ah yes, Refined Storage, my beloved. And on the surface, things might look the same, but there has been a lot of changes under the hood. Let's talk about grids. And prior to this version, you had to actually use a fluid grid to access fluids. Well, that's no longer the case, as it has all been integrated into a singular grid. All things have kind of been merged into this one, no longer needing separates. Now, some other nice grid changes is, for example, when we have an auto crafting pattern ready to go, it's now going to have an orange backdrop, allowing you to easily see things that do have auto crafting recipes. Now, on the topic of auto crafting, some amazing changes has actually came to the pattern grid, allowing us to inscribe more pattern types. So not only do we have crafting patterns and processing patterns, those are still relatively the same, we now have the stonecutter patterns, and we can actually do smithing table patterns, things that actually weren't possible in the prior version. So let's try out the stonecutter. We place a piece of stone in here or anything that can be worked inside of the stonecutter, and then we select what we want it to make and build the pattern. Cool thing about these patterns that I've noticed is the patterns identify with a little bit of a texture change what type of pattern they are. For example, this is a crafting pattern, and this is going to be the stonecutter pattern, but they all go inside of the crafter. Everything except for a processing pattern, which still goes inside of a crafter, just is handled differently. Speaking of crafter, it's no longer called crafter, it's actually called an Autocrafter now. So now let's take a look at the actual crafting interface. So when we go to request a craft, you might notice this has been dramatically changed as well. We can now see all of the available resources, or essentially the resource tree required to craft what we're about to select. So speaking of selecting, let's tell it how many we want. We have a button over here that will tell it, hey, what's the maximum amount we can actually craft? Or we can go down and select any specific amount. Let's go ahead and say, I want to craft 32 out of my available 64 stone, and we have a few buttons. We can reset, which resets it all the way back to default, cancel, and then there's also a start and notify button. The notify is definitely new. Let's say we want 16, we hit start and we have notify available. So whenever we start this, what should happen is we should get notified whenever it has finished crafting. Of course, it's slow at the start, but there it goes. We now got notified that we have 16 chiseled stone bricks that have finished their autocraft. That's pretty darn cool. Now, of course, I mentioned it is slow, but you speed up these crafters, of course, by putting speed upgrades in. And notice whenever I hover over this now, it tells you what can go into each interface. Now, there was some other interesting changes about the Autocrafter that involve recipes themselves. What we're able to do is have two separate recipes. For example, this is a crafting table recipe. The result is a crafting table that uses oak to craft it. This uses spruce to craft it, but they both have the same output. If we put them into these autocrafters, in separate autocrafters, we can actually define which one uses what recipe and uses what ingredients based on the priority of our crafter. For example, if I set this to a higher priority, it should craft the actual crafting tables out of spruce before trying to craft it out of the oak. Now, I'm assuming if we run out of oak before one or the other, it will craft it. But what we should notice is our spruce logs going down. If I craft 10 here, you'll notice our spruce actually went down, not our oak. But if we set the priority the other way around, for example, if I remove this priority and take it back down to 0, and I set this priority to 1, we will notice that it will then use the oak to craft more. And by the way, it's now control plus clicking to be able to get this. And there it goes. Our oak actually disappeared. So of course, use this as you will. I'm sure there are going to be some interesting applications that are going to be specific to this one problem, but this can now be done. So now let's talk about one of my favorite new changes that have come to Refined Storage 2, and that is how processing patterns can be handled. Prior to this version, we would have to use some pretty interesting redstone to be able to technically lock a Autocrafter. And there are some recipes within modded Minecraft that require you to only allow so many of a item into a crafter. And before, this would essentially insert all items or try to insert all items for those recipes for as many as you craft in order to get that recipe done. Well, what if we only wanted to keep one at a time inside of this furnace? Now you can do that, and you can do it really, really easily. And that's because we have some new modes over here, which are really, really nice. Now, by default, we have our regular non-lock mode, which is how it operates normally. It's just going to feed as much as it can into the machine that it's attached to. Then we have our redstone locking mode, which is what we had before, which allows us to send a redstone pulse, and that will essentially trigger a new recipe and is how we've used refined storage for the longest of time. But now we have this mode, which is locking mode. This is going to lock until the connected machine is empty. And this is very, very powerful in my opinion, and probably one of the easiest ways to actually use this locking mode. Then we have the next one, which is lock until all outputs are received. And I think this is also another great way to handle this. Essentially, it works the same way that we used the redstone before. It waits for the input for the main product to come back into the refined storage before it then sends out a new set. This is another very powerful way of doing your auto crafting. And then of course we have our regular mode again, lock high redstone signal, and then we have lock until low redstone signal. So we're just basically going back to using redstone, which is still a viable method. So let's put this into practice. To do this, I am going to be setting up this furnace to technically smelt something. Now over here, I have an exporter, and another cool little feature is that when we put something into an exporter now and we don't have the resources for it, it's going to warn us and tell us, hey, this is actually what we're missing in our storage. But as soon as I put this in the storage, we're now going to see it's going to go ahead and start exporting it into the side. That's perfect. Now we could use a regulator card to only keep one coal at a time in here, but for right now, we just need to send it in. Let's focus primarily on how this locking mode will work. So now let's go ahead and make ourselves a processing pattern. And what I want to do is I want to turn sand into glass. So we'll go here and we'll click on this. We just simply click the move item button, and now our recipe has defined one sand into glass, and we build that pattern. And let's go ahead and take a look at what this looks like by default. So by default, without any sort of locking, essentially, if I go to craft, 16 of the glass, we will be able to see right off the bat that it's just going to send all 16, or try to send all 16 as soon as it can into here to be smelted. And that's fine for some recipes, but it doesn't work for everything. So what if I wanted to cancel this? We can go back up to the manager here and cancel all. Let's go ahead and take this out. What if I only wanted to send one item at a time into the furnace to be smelted? Well, thankfully, we don't have to change anything about our pattern, but we do change it inside of here. So let's set it to lock until connected machine is empty. I think that is pretty darn cool. And we can go ahead and now request more glass. So let's control click and we'll say, let's do 6 glass. We'll start this, and only one sand should go in here. And the cool part is it actually is not waiting for the return or anything. That's the other mode. It'll just wait for it to go empty, and then it sends another one in. That's really, really neat, and I love this new feature. Now, the same thing can happen on the next one. Right now it says currently locked, but we can actually set it to Autocrafter is locked until it receives. And so it's going to wait until it receives the product before sending another one in. Right now it is setting it to because I changed it mid-operation, but you can see it's essentially going to function in a similar method, except this actually waits to receive the product before going again. And in my opinion, these changes, this change alone, is going to change the way autocrafting is handled with this mod. It makes a ton of sense and has been something that has been missing from the refined storage mod for years. Now, I did mention regulators, and this is going to be something that is going to take a little bit of getting used to because regulators have changed. Before, in the prior version, you would put the regulator in and then define your value inside of your exporter, but that's no longer the case. Now, what we need to do is if I take all of this coal out, for example, and I define coal inside of our exporter, we want to say only allow 10 to be in that inventory. And so that 10 is now what is going to be regulated. And so if I put this back in my storage, there should only ever be 10 COL inside of the storage here, and it should stop just like that. Now, this also is going to be similar on the import. However, the import is going to keep the certain amount of items in here until it reaches that amount before then sending out. And the best way to show this is, for example, to put the glass in here. And let's just say we want to keep 6 glass before then allowing it to export. And that is going to do that exact thing. So the glass will build up in here until it reaches 6, and then it will export any that go over that. Sorry, did I say export? I actually meant import. It's easy to get those confused. Now the wrench also got some love in this update. We are now able to shift right click to be able to wrench things off. Now the cool part about this is it's actually going to retain the information that was set on that importer. So I believe this was the importer that we got, and notice my regulator is still inside, so I can pull this off and we can move things around while also keeping the information that was inside. For example, this Autocrafter has crafting patterns. I can shift right click and I can pick those now back up. And then I can jump up here, place it back down, and all of my patterns are still in there, making it so much easier to move these crafters. So I wonder if you've made it this far in the video without questioning, how do I have things stored without having anything in that disk drive? Well, this is where the relay that was recently changed comes into play, because essentially what the relay allows you to do is have subnets. And this entire time, this storage has been running technically off of a subnetwork. And so let's take a look at what has been lurking behind this setup the entire time. And that is the powerful relay that has been recently reworked. And the way this relay works is kind of complicated technically, but it is really, really simple when it just comes down to a few button clicks. Essentially what I have here is I have a network that is powering or being powered, and it has a crafting grid, and then it has some storage. So it has a storage here storing items and fluids. And then we have the relay with a cable running into the back of the relay, and then the output side of the relay, which was clicked onto this wire, is allowing this network to read the contents of this network. Pretty darn cool, right? But it can kind of do more than that, because inside of here, if I go ahead and I turn this off in its default mode, which is pass through, it allows everything from this network to be transferred over to this side. We can access everything, but we can customize every little aspect. Let's say we don't want energy to pass through. Well, if we click no pass through, nothing will then be passed through, allowing us to select specifically what we want. So let's say I want to allow energy to pass through. Well, it'll take the energy from this network, and we no longer need this controller anymore, because now all of the power is just simply coming from this side. That's another powerful part of this. You can actually share power between subnets. And so let's take a look at this even further. As of right now, the only thing I'm allowing through is power. So we can only see auto crafting patterns that are hooked up to the side, no items. How do we allow the items? Well, we have to allow the pass through of our storage, and then we can specify specifically what we want to be stored and the access mode. So this is kind of like a storage bus, or not a storage bus, a external storage from Refined Storage that is being attached to another Refined Storage network. And this is pretty darn neat. And I think this is going to change the way that setups are made in the future. And this is another cool part, right? You can choose whether or not to have your security options sent through. So let's say your main system here is locked down and you only want to allow your friends to pull out 3 different types of items. Well, you can do that. You can have this network over here not connected to the security, right? But this will still be connected to the main grid security. And you can give access to those few types of items that you can specify right here. Let's just say I only want to allow stone, glass, and oak to be accessed by my friends. So stone, glass, and oak through here. And then on this side, that's the only thing that they should be able to see. Should be if I set it to allow list. So now you can see that's the only thing in the network that they have access to that's not locked by security. But if you wanted to pass through security, you definitely can have your security pass through, and all of your settings from your main network will then be sent to your other networks. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other use cases for this, but that's the magic of modded, is simply coming up with your own ideas and plans and use cases for these new features. For some more new features, you can now have more than one controller on your main network, allowing you to send more power in if your system actually needs it, and also possibly for decoration. So let's now talk about the configuration card. Have you ever wanted, for example, your exporters to have a very specific filter in place, and you wanted to copy that to more exporters? Well, now you can shift right click on this exporter to copy the settings and then paste it into the next. So you can see I shift right clicked and then pasted it into the next one. And you can continue doing this, pasting all of these configurations. And as you can see, this has nothing in it. I shift right click after copying, it's now there. Of course, if there is a configuration, I think you shift right click in the air to clear and then shift right click again to set your configuration. And then now all of these now have the same configuration set. This is another awesome addition. So I think now it's time to talk about storage and the way things have changed with storage. And I think these are some great quality of life changes that have recently been added to Refined Storage 2. Now, prior to this update, if you wanted to include a fluid into your Refined Storage system externally, you would have to use an external storage and you'd have to click a few buttons to get this to work. You couldn't actually have a storage that contained a fluid and also a storage that contained items and have them both read from the same block. Well, now you should be able to, because whenever you place an external storage on here, you no longer have to select whether or not this is a fluid or if this is going to be an item storage. It's just all now connected into one. And so now, without changing any GUI buttons or anything like that, automatically we can see we now have lava inside of this container and we're reading it from her storage. This is a pretty nice quality of life. But now with this comes some other new changes, right? We now have this button right here, Void Excess Resources, and this is going to be available in a lot of different things that we have set up. For example, we even have this button over here. Now, what exactly does this do? Well, if we do have this turned on, you can see it'll only work when it's in allow mode. So let's switch this over to an allow list and we'll specify lava in here. I think we drag lava in. And what this is going to do is if we start filling in this container here, this grid with lava, what it should do is it should overflow, or any excess should be overflowed and voided. So if I set this priority to 1 to be higher than everything else, essentially, if I keep dumping in lava, if I have a whole lot of lava to dump in, like that goes 9. I think this container goes up to 32. I think can infinite, this can infinitely do it. Okay. So yes, if I keep dumping fluid in here till it goes up to 32, it's no longer going to allow me to fill this container anymore, and it's not going to overflow anything else. But what it will do is it will consume it, but it now gets voided. And this can be kind of useful for a lot of sort of things that you have constantly running. You may want to void things. This is going to be really helpful in that regard. And this can be especially helpful if you, for example, have fluid disks and you don't want your fluid disks to be taken over by water or other things like that. Now, just like our terminal being merged and also our external storage being merged with items and fluids, the interface also now is the same way. And the fluid interface is now gone and it's all one. So if we want to, for example, have lava pulled in here, we can set our value. That's going to keep lava in stock. And if we want to turn items in or deposit fluids in here, anything like that, then it's easily going to be doable as well. So this now handles both. Now, this right here has been something I've wanted for a long time from Refined Storage, and that is the ability to fill the water buckets and stuff like that from within our actual crafting grid. And you can also do that from the interface as well. If I, for example, have a bucket, I can then fill that from the interface. This has been something that I have wanted for a while and has been a part of Applied Energistics for a very long time, but now we can do it in Refined Storage. Now, staying on topic with storage, some other cool things we can now do is we can upgrade our disks and retain the current items that are inside. For example, I can go ahead and grab a crafting table, and what we can do is we can upgrade our current 1K to a 64K, and all of our remaining items that were in there will now just automatically get sent, and then we get our remaining storage part back out. That is a pretty cool quality of life. And the same thing also works, by the way, for the storage blocks themselves. Don't forget those exist. Now, some other nifty updates that have come out for the exporter and also the constructor is the ability to have round robin modes by default. So we have round robin, we also have a random mode, which sounds really cool, and then a default. Now, the round robin is going to be something we're very familiar with. It's going to try to send glass, then it will send oak, then it'll send spruce, then it'll send cobblestone, then it'll send sand, and then loop back around and try to keep one of these and always do that operation. Random, I would assume, will kind of try to randomize all of these items. Random is very weird, but that could be used in some really interesting redstone applications. But round robin seems pretty cool, but having round robin on the constructor is also incredibly cool. So I would assume that the way this is going to work is it is going to send the glass like it did, then it will send logs next, and then it's going to send the spruce log. Maybe. There it goes, spruce log, and then it'll send cobblestone. I guess if all operations are happening frequently enough, and then it will send sand. So if it's just being broken fast enough, you can see that it is doing that. That is pretty darn cool and could be very useful for getting through multiple processes with using a minimal setup, just like this, right? This would be really nice. Now, this, if I turn this on, it should see all of those items, of course, getting sent in just as you would expect, just as we had mentioned. And then randomly, that one's going to be kind of interesting. Yeah, random is very chaotic, and of course we may end up with a ton of oak in here and very little cobble. That's just way probability works. But still, like you said, a lot of interesting redstone could be done with that random mechanic. And of course, some other smaller changes to sort of wrap things up is the fact that where we look is now where the actual devices will be placed. For example, if I want to place this on the side, no longer do I have to jump and orient myself in a weird place to be able to place down my crafter. I just go, hey, I want it facing the controller, and I look at that position, and that is the direction that it will go. Very much like a hopper. Of course, how could I forget the colored cables? We now have colored cables. The base cable, by the way, will connect to all colored cables, but as you can see, colored cables do not connect to one another, but we do now have them in all 16 colors. Now, those colored cables are also in all of the, for example, interfaces. So our importers, our exporters, everything also has a colored cable variant, along with all of the different terminals having their own colors, the detectors having it. Basically, everything that exists in here can also be a different color. And also something I should mention with cables, the recipe for cables have actually changed, as cables now require this quartz enriched copper. So we now have a use for copper in the game. And something I wanted to mention, all the textures that you see today may not actually be what these textures will be in the near future, as there will probably end up being a texture revamp coming soon. But as of right now, this is what we have, and I hope you've enjoyed learning about all of the updates that are now available in Refined Storage 2. And of course, a big shout out to Raul for putting all of this together and putting all of the work and time needed in order to completely rewrite this entire mod from the ground up. It definitely shows, and I am pretty excited to get to experience this in mod packs coming soon. Now, of course, for more information about this mod, be sure to check out the Refined Storage Wiki down in the description below, where all of the changes are listed in detail, and I recommend giving it a good look over. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this mod update, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.